Well, good morning. It is Saturday, May 23rd. I am Heather E. Clausen. I am the pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church and the United Methodist Church, both in Herman, Minnesota. In a few moments, we will be reading for our morning devotion from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2. Before I talk about Mark, I do want to make a comment, and it is very much in alignment with what Mark's gospel teaches. Right now, in our country, the opening of churches has become politicized and a battleground. I want to share with you two facts. One, the ELCA and the UMC are working diligently and have sent out proposals of phases that we will follow to open safely and wisely. And one of the things that each of the churches I serve is working on right now is to prepare so that we will be both in person and virtual, so that those who are connected through these live broadcasts of devotion and worship will stay connected, so that even when small groups can gather in our churches and that decision moves forward, there will be those who choose not to, not feeling that it is safe. And that needs to be honored by offering the worship virtually and within the church. You know, much of what we see happening today is exactly what Mark's gospel seems to be geared towards. Mark wrote in a time where there was quite a nationalistic fervor, and it was influencing how people viewed God and what God would do. What they saw was they wanted God to come and to intervene militaristically into their world to bring about change. What Mark taught about was, by the way, folks, God already did. When he teaches about Jesus, he's teaching about God entering into the world, entering in and moving through Jesus Christ, coming to earth. And that movement, as Mark writes, had already begun. As Mark writes, there were house churches. There were the spreading through missionaries of this message. But Mark's intention is to talk about the goals that God has through Jesus. And the primary is to heal whatever breach had gotten between God and humankind, and misunderstanding of who God is. God chose to self-reveal God's self. But even in addition, even more so in some ways, it was also to heal the rifts between people. So God being self-revealing, God coming among us, was to spread the understanding of God's intentions, which we often talk about. The foundation of love, the unity of people, the inclusion and fair treatment, justice for all. And so that's what we hear as the words we share this morning, beginning in chapter 2 in the Gospel of Mark, beginning at verse 23. One Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, Have you never read what David did? When he and his companions were hungry and in need of food, he entered the house of God, where Abiathar was high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even over the Sabbath." Sabbath. What Mark is sharing is that the Sabbath that we first heard about in Genesis, on the seventh day God rested and set for us the practice of Sabbath, was not about rules and regulations, but it was about healing and restoring and caring. We struggle in our country with being willing to rest. This is a Memorial Day weekend. This is, for many, a 3-day weekend. And it is different this year. But how often do we take the time off to be busy? We catch up on everything that hasn't gotten done during the week. We catch up on projects. We don't seem to be able to just sit, rest, appreciate. I bet you remember when you were a child how much easier it was. You know, as I was preparing this morning, I was remembering back to younger years, and a dear friend. And she and I would often just lie in the grass, look at the clouds, and try to decide what the shapes look like. And of course, it was animals, it was a lot of different things. But I remember that time as being peaceful, being joyful, filled with some laughter, but also filled in some way that maybe at that age I couldn't understand, but with an appreciation of the creation around me. Now, I am not a swimmer or a boater, and I have gone fishing in my lifetime, but not too often. But there is something for me about being near water, to sit and to listen and to look around and to see what the earth looks like around this body of water. And sometimes it's rocks and hills. Sometimes the water is so clear that there's this reflection of what is above, and I've seen stars reflected on the water. It's a moment of peace. It's a moment of appreciation. That is Sabbath. It is resting. It is appreciating. It is taking time. And when we hear this in the Gospel of Mark, that is what he is sharing with those who thought that the way you keep the Sabbath holy was to follow rules and regulations. But God intended Sabbath so we could rest and be restored. And in the midst of that rest, be blessed by a greater appreciation of the presence of the holy. This weekend is a special weekend for many. Our third day of the weekend is Memorial Day. It is a time of remembering. It is a time of thinking of those who served, some who immediately made the ultimate sacrifice, others who have gone from us in more natural ways but served. And that is the focus of that day. But I hope you don't just fill it with busyness. Today, tomorrow, Monday. But you find some moments to rest, to look around and appreciate. Maybe find a quiet spot. Maybe you'll have the opportunity to be filled with some awe and some wonder. We do not heal. We are not restored. We are not reinvigorated without Sabbath rest. And without taking Sabbath rest, sometimes we also are less aware of God's presence in our lives. May you find a moment today of Sabbath rest. May God reveal to you something that maybe it's always been before you, but all of a sudden you're given the opportunity to notice it. As Mark says, the Sabbath was not made for God, but was made for humankind, because God understood us and all that we would need. Go in peace. Amen.